Every zombie movie gets the same thing wrong. They show survivors raiding grocery stores and barricading doors, but they completely ignore the real threats that would actually kill you, not the undead. The infrastructure collapse, the biological failures, and the silent disasters no one sees coming. Today, I'm breaking down everything zombie movies haven't considered about survival, starting with the one thing that unravels everything else within 48 hours, the sudden failure of the power grid. Here's something zombie movies love to do. The lights flicker, go dark, and everyone grabs a flashlight like it's a minor inconvenience. But the power grid going down isn't atmosphere. It's a death sentence. The U.S. electrical grid requires constant, active human monitoring at hundreds of substations just to stay functional. Trained operators adjust frequency stability around the clock. The moment those operators stop showing up, the grid doesn't slowly wind down. It collapses. And it collapses fast. During the 2003 Northeast blackout, 50 million people lost power in under 10 minutes. That wasn't a zombie apocalypse. That was a handful of cascading control failures. Just a few dominoes, and the entire system flatlined. Without operators, thermal power plants begin uncontrolled shutdown within 48 to 72 hours. Hospitals? Their backup generators carry 24 to 72 hours of fuel. Sounds like a cushion until you realize nobody is coming to refuel them. But here's the real gut punch. The grid cannot restart itself. Restoring power after a total blackout requires trained engineers executing coordinated black start procedures in precise sequences. Without that expertise, you can't reconnect a single neighborhood. Solar panels and generators sound great until you realize they require manufacturing ecosystems that no longer exist. The power isn't coming back on, ever. And if losing electricity sounds survivable, wait until you realize what it does to every medication sitting in every pharmacy across the country. The rapid decay of prescription medication. Here's something zombie movies never show you. The quiet deaths. Not the dramatic ones with teeth and screaming, but the ones that happen in a bedroom, alone, because a pill bottle that used to keep someone alive just stopped working. 131 million Americans take at least one prescription medication every single day. That's not a small demographic. That's roughly 2/3 of the adult population. And the moment supply chains collapse, every single one of those people is on a countdown timer they can't see. Let's start with the most urgent one, insulin. It loses its effectiveness after just 28 days at room temperature. The second the power grid dies and refrigeration disappears, 8.4 million insulin-dependent Americans have roughly 4 weeks before their medication is worthless. That's not a survival story. That's a death sentence with a calendar. But here's where it gets worse. People will scavenge pharmacies. Of course they will. And they'll find bottles of antibiotics, heart medication, blood thinners, and they'll think they've hit the jackpot. They haven't. Most medications simply lose potency over time with poor storage, quietly becoming useless without looking any different. But some are genuinely dangerous. Tetracycline antibiotics, for example, don't just stop working. They produce toxic degradation compounds that actively damage your kidneys. You're not taking medicine at that point. You're poisoning yourself and calling it hope. And the cruelest part? There's no way to know. Someone with a seizure disorder takes their scavenged medication every morning, feels fine, thinks they're managing. But the potency crossed a threshold weeks ago. They won't find out until they're seizing on the floor of some abandoned house with nobody around who can help. No test strips, no lab equipment, no second chances. The medication apocalypse doesn't announce itself. It just waits. But if a silent pharmaceutical collapse sounds bad, wait until you hear what happens when nuclear power plants lose their entire operating staff overnight. The industrial danger of unmanned power plants. Here's something zombie movies never show you. And honestly, it might be the single most terrifying thing on this entire list. The United States operates 93 commercial nuclear reactors spread across 54 facilities. Every single one of them requires continuous active cooling for years after shutdown. You can't just walk away from a nuclear power plant. Walking away is the disaster. Let me put this in perspective. When Fukushima's cooling systems failed, the first reactor suffered a meltdown within 24 hours. By day 4, all 3 reactor units had experienced severe core damage. The mandatory evacuation zone and surrounding restricted areas covered over 1,000 square kilometers, and that was with emergency responders actively trying to stop it. In a zombie apocalypse, there are 0 emergency responders. There's nobody. Every single one of those 54 facilities begins its own countdown the moment the last operator leaves. But here's where it gets so much worse. Spent fuel cooling pools heat to boiling within days without active circulation. The zirconium cladding on fuel rods ignites above 1,200 degrees Celsius, producing radioactive fires with global dispersal potential. This isn't a local problem contained to one unlucky town. This is a hemispheric extinction event happening simultaneously at dozens of locations. And the real nightmare isn't even the initial meltdown. It's the 40-year decommissioning process that now never happens. Every unmaintained facility becomes a slowly expanding dead zone, growing larger year after year, decade after decade. Nobody alive has the expertise to stop it. Meanwhile, coal and natural gas plants add their own chaos, with pressurized vessel failures contaminating surrounding areas with toxic heavy metal ash within just 1 to 2 weeks of abandonment. Zombie movies treat nuclear plants as dramatic backdrops. In reality, they're ticking geological time bombs that make the zombies look like a minor inconvenience. But if you think invisible radiation is a terrifying way to die, wait until you hear about the survival threat that starts inside your own mouth, the absolute necessity of dental hygiene. You survived the zombies. You survived the grid collapse. You survived the nuclear fallout, and a molar is going to kill you. I know that sounds like a joke. It's not. Before modern dentistry existed, dental infections were a genuine cause of death in human civilization. Archaeological evidence from medieval grave sites consistently shows severe dental disease in the majority of remains, and untreated infections from abscessed teeth could easily spread to the jaw, the bloodstream, and the brain. Not war, not famine, teeth. Here's why this matters for a zombie apocalypse. Without fluoridated water, toothpaste, and regular cleanings, dental decay accelerates significantly. Studies show fluoride reduces cavities by roughly 25%, so remove it entirely along with every other modern prevention tool, and your mouth deteriorates fast. That means within months of societal collapse, cavities that would have been a routine filling become full-blown infections. An untreated dental abscess causes bacteremia, bacteria flooding into your bloodstream, within weeks. If that progresses to sepsis, the mortality rate exceeds 40%, even with a modern ICU, and a full team of doctors pumping you with antibiotics. Without antibiotics, that number climbs above 90%. And before you say just pull the tooth, let me stop you. Field tooth extraction without anesthesia or sterile instruments carries massive risks of hemorrhage, infection, and jaw fracture. Throughout most of human history, barber surgeons performing extractions frequently killed their patients. The cure is almost as deadly as the disease. The entire infrastructure of modern dental care vanishes overnight. No dentists, no anesthesia, no antibiotics, no sterile tools, nothing. A single infected molar can silently progress to a brain infection, and the people around you can do absolutely nothing but watch. This is real documented history that civilization is about to repeat. And honestly, dying from a toothache surrounded by helpless friends might be the most undignified way to go in the entire apocalypse. But if losing your teeth sounds bad, wait until you hear what happens when you lose your glasses. Spectacle wearers. Picture this. A survivor drops their glasses during a scramble over rubble. They hit a rock, one lens shatters, and suddenly everything beyond arm's length dissolves into a gray, shapeless blur. That's not a minor inconvenience. That's a death sentence. And it applies to the majority of people alive right now. Over 75% of people in developed nations use corrective lenses. 3 out of every 4 survivors in your group are one broken frame away from being functionally blind, not squinting a little blind. A myopic person without correction has a functional visual range of 30 to 50 centimeters. That means they cannot identify faces, navigate uneven terrain, detect threats approaching, aim a weapon, or read anything. They are completely dependent on someone else for every basic survival task. But here's where it gets worse. Contact lenses aren't the backup plan people think they are. Contacts require saline solution matched to the body's natural osmolarity of around 285 to 290 milliosmoles per liter, with precise pH balance and sterility. You cannot reliably make this at home. Homemade saline causes corneal ulcers within days, which leads to permanent blindness. Trying to improvise is literally worse than doing nothing. So just make new glasses, right? Eyeglass manufacturing requires precision lens grinding to tolerances of plus or minus 0.1 millimeters, using specialized equipment that has zero consumer equivalent. And becoming an optometrist takes 4 years of institutional education. Once those institutions are gone, that knowledge is functionally extinct within a single generation. Nobody is teaching lens grinding in a bombed-out high school. And before anyone suggests LASIK, performing laser eye surgery without antibiotics in a non-sterile environment creates a massive risk of corneal infection. Without proper post-operative care, you'd likely blind every patient you tried to help. Within 30 years of collapse, Nobody knows how to correct anyone's vision. Nobody can manufacture lenses. And every new generation born with poor eyesight just stays that way, permanently. An entire civilization slowly going blind, one broken pair of glasses at a time. But if losing your eyesight sounds bad, wait until you hear what's happening to the zombies themselves. Because decomposition doesn't care about plot armor, the biological reality of decomposition. Here's something zombie movies never show you. The bodies don't just lie there, they transform. And what they transform into is arguably more dangerous than whatever killed them in the first place. In warm climates, a human corpse moves through early decomposition in 1 to 3 days. Advanced decomposition hits between days 3 and 8. Within 30 days, you're looking at skeletal remains. Now multiply that by thousands of bodies across a single city. That's not a backdrop. That's an ecological event. A single decomposing body produces over 200 distinct bacterial species. It releases methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and dimethyl disulfide, gases so potent that humans can smell them from over 500 meters away. One body does that. Now picture a million-person city where even 10% of the population didn't make it out. The air itself becomes a warning sign. But here's where it gets truly nasty. Blowflies can detect carrion from 2 kilometers away. They arrive fast, and they lay 200 to 500 eggs within 15 minutes of finding exposed flesh. The maggot blooms that follow attract scavengers. Wild dogs, rats, birds. These populations explode, feeding on the dead, and then they start competing with survivors for everything else: food, water, territory. The corpses don't just rot. They reorganize the entire local food web, and you can't just bury the problem. Mass graves remain biohazard zones for 2 to 4 months. Decomposition byproducts leach into groundwater up to 80 meters from burial sites and remain viable contaminants for 1 to 2 years. Burning creates toxic smoke. Exposure feeds the scavenger cycle. There is no clean solution. Every choice is just picking which ecological disaster you'd prefer. Zombie movies treat corpse piles as set dressing. They're not. They're expanding dynamic biohazard systems that poison your water, attract new predators, and make entire neighborhoods uninhabitable long after the bodies stop moving. But rotting infrastructure and poisoned groundwater aren't even the scariest thing survivors lose. Because everything you'd need to solve these problems, every water purification method, every medical reference, every agricultural guide, exists in a format that requires electricity to access. The loss of digital knowledge. Here's something nobody thinks about. Every survival fantasy assumes you can find a book, look something up, figure it out. But you can't, because most of what you need doesn't exist on paper anymore. As of 2026, the overwhelming majority of newly published scientific, medical, and technical research exists only in digital form. Journals, datasets, clinical studies, technical specifications, almost none of it gets printed, and data centers consume around 415 terawatt hours of electricity annually just to keep that information alive. The moment the grid dies, those servers stop. Drives lose environmental controls. Terabytes of irreplaceable human knowledge begin degrading within days. But here's where it gets worse. This wasn't an accident. Between 1995 and 2010, most academic institutions, libraries, and government agencies deliberately destroyed their physical archives. They shredded them, recycled them, threw them away. The assumption was simple. Digital storage is permanent, so why keep the paper? That decision is irreversible. The knowledge didn't just move to digital. It was deleted from physical existence and placed entirely inside a system that requires continuous electricity to survive. Let me give you the detail that should genuinely disturb you. Sure, major medical textbooks like Gray's Anatomy and Harrison's still get printed, but the vast ecosystem of research papers, clinical databases, drug interaction tools, and diagnostic algorithms that modern medicine actually runs on, purely digital. That means a retired doctor trained in the 1980s with a shelf full of old reference books is categorically more valuable than a young surgeon whose entire workflow depends on digital access, because the internet has an expiration date measured in weeks. Books don't require electricity. And then there's the second-generation problem, which nobody talks about. Even survivors who understand electronics, medicine, or engineering can't train replacements without institutional frameworks. The knowledge required to maintain even basic systems dies with the trained generation. Now, some of this is speculative extrapolation beyond documented baselines, but the trajectory is clear. Within 30 years, there is nobody left who remembers how any of it worked. Humanity's collective knowledge doesn't burn in a fire. It just quietly blinks off. But if losing your knowledge sounds terrifying, wait until you realize what's happening underneath your feet the entire time. The nightmare of urban plumbing failure. Here's something nobody in zombie fiction ever addresses. And it hits faster than starvation, faster than dehydration, faster than any raiding party. Your toilet stops working. Modern sewage systems require continuous power to pump waste through the network, cut the electricity, and backup occurs within 6 to 12 hours. Not days, hours. And once it backs up, there is zero way to reverse it without industrial equipment that no longer functions. Now, let's talk scale. A single person generates roughly 80 to 100 gallons of sewage per day. A neighborhood of just 100 people? That's up to 10,000 gallons of untreated human waste every single day with absolutely nowhere to go. It floods basements, it pools and streets, it seeps into every nearby water source. And within a week, your entire block smells like something died inside of something else that also died. But the smell isn't the real problem. It's the warning sign. Cholera bacteria exist at concentrations of 1 million to 1 billion cells per milliliter in untreated sewage. One contaminated water source produces epidemic diarrheal disease within 3 to 5 days. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid, hepatitis A. These diseases kill approximately 2 million people annually right now in the modern world, with hospitals and antibiotics. Without either of those, mortality in affected populations jumps to 15 to 30%. That's not a zombie killing your group. That's a puddle. And here's where it gets truly hopeless. The pipes themselves are already failing. Most urban plumbing infrastructure is 70 to 100 years old and degrading even with active maintenance crews. The replacement parts require industrial manufacturing for cast iron, PVC, and copper components. Once a pipe fails, it stays failed, permanently. But the real kicker is upstream contamination. It doesn't matter how careful your group is. It doesn't matter if you dug perfect latrines and boiled every drop of water. If another group of survivors 2 miles upstream is dumping waste into the same river you're drinking from, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. And speaking of slow, invisible killers, your body can't fight without modern infrastructure. Wait until you hear what happens when your diet runs out of a single vitamin deficiencies. Here's something nobody considers about scurvy. It doesn't start with bleeding gums or teeth falling out. It starts with depression. Weeks before a single physical symptom appears, vitamin C deficiency begins attacking mood-regulating neurotransmitters in the brain. Survivors become irritable, withdrawn, paranoid. They snap at people over nothing, isolate themselves from the group, and lose the motivation to contribute, and nobody knows why. The group assumes it's stress or cowardice or someone becoming a liability. Arguments escalate, trust collapses, people get exiled or worse, and the entire time, the real cause is sitting in their diet. Let me explain. Vitamin C is the backbone of collagen production. Collagen holds together your blood vessels, your skin, your immune tissue, basically everything that keeps you from falling apart. Without vitamin C intake for 8 to 12 weeks, that system starts failing. Gums bleed, wounds stop healing, old scars literally reopen. And if it continues for 4 to 12 months without correction, your blood vessels hemorrhage internally, and your immune system shuts down completely. You bleed to death from the inside. The problem is that every food source survivors default to in zombie fiction is practically vitamin C free. Grains, preserved meats, canned goods, without proper variety. Stored vegetables lose 50% of their vitamin C within 1 to 2 months and 90% within 6 months. A survivor eating nothing but scavenged pantry food becomes deficient within 2 to 3 months. And scurvy doesn't require an apocalypse to return. It already resurfaces in modern homeless populations and neglected elderly care facilities. All it needs is sustained dietary neglect. But here's the thing, there's actually a solution, and it's one of the few genuinely useful pieces of survival knowledge in this entire video. Fermented vegetables, sauerkraut, kimchi. Lactofermentation preserves vitamin C without refrigeration, without canning infrastructure, without anything except salt, cabbage, and thyme. These aren't comfort foods. They're the difference between a functioning community and a group of people bleeding from their gums and trying to kill each other over nothing. But if vitamin deficiency sounds like a slow, quiet killer, wait until you hear about the very loud, very fast problem created by 180 million abandoned pets. The domestic animal population explosion. Every single threat we've talked about so far has one thing in common. They're all human problems caused by the collapse of human systems. The grid, the medications, the nuclear plants, the sewage, scourge, the scurvy. All of it traces back to infrastructure that humans built and can no longer maintain. But this last one is different. This is nature responding to the vacancy. And the response is not friendly. The United States alone has roughly 65 million pet dogs and 47 million pet cats. That's over 110 million domesticated predators living inside human homes on the day everything collapses. Within weeks, the ones that survive become feral. Within months, they form packs. And in the absence of any culling or population control, feral dog populations can double rapidly over just a few years. Do the math on that over a decade, and you reach a number that dwarfs any zombie horde Hollywood has ever put on screen. But here's what makes this genuinely terrifying. These are not wild animals slowly learning how to hunt. These are domestic animals that already understand human behavior. They know where food is stored. They know how shelters are structured. They know human movement patterns and vulnerability. Now they're applying all of that knowledge as opportunistic predators. Feral dogs develop pack hierarchies, territory systems, and coordinated hunting strategies within months. They are intelligent, socially organized, and they remember everything about how you used to live. Feral and stray dogs already kill around 25,000 people annually worldwide, mostly through rabies transmission. That's with animal control, with law enforcement, with population management programs actively suppressing their numbers. Remove all of that, and the figure scales with the population and the territory they claim. And dogs aren't even the full picture. Free-ranging cats currently kill an estimated 1.3 to 4 billion birds and 6.3 to 22.3 billion small mammals every year in the US alone. Without any check on that, they accelerate the collapse of small animal populations that survivors depend on for protein. Escaped livestock, cattle, pigs, horses, chickens establish feral populations within weeks and compete directly with humans for crops, water, and territory. Island ecosystems in Hawaii and the Galapagos show that invasive species derived from human introductions devastate native wildlife, driving high extinction rates among vulnerable species. That same pattern plays out on the mainland. Whether survivors kill the animals, befriend them, or ignore them entirely is irrelevant. The ecological restructuring proceeds independently of any human decision. The world doesn't wait for survivors to get organized. It has already started becoming something else. The zombies were never the real threat. They were just the event that cleared the stage. Everything that comes after, every single thing we've covered, is what actually kills you. If you enjoyed this video and want to see why you can't survive Resident Evil Zombies, click the video on the screen now.